Hi guys, welcome back to Too Cool for Middle School. Today I am taking a bunch of questions that I get pretty often in my DMs on Instagram and then like sometimes in comments on YouTube videos, and I'm putting all of those questions together into one tag video about the process of becoming a teacher. So this is the How I Became a Teacher tag, and anybody can do it. If you have a YouTube channel and you would like to make this video, that would be great because everybody is in a different situation or lives where there are different requirements or just kind of comes into this job in different ways. So I definitely wanted to make a video about my experience for those people that have questions, but I also wanted to open this up to other teachers because not all of my story will necessarily apply to everyone, but then maybe there's somebody else out there that you could glean some good information from. So I'm gonna make a playlist with everybody else who has done this video, and I will link that down below. So this will be a growing playlist as people have the time to sit down and make this. I will just add their video to the playlist. And then if you do the video and you would like to be added to the playlist, just contact me and let me know and we can put yours in there too. So hopefully all of this will be helpful for those newer teachers out there or people who are just looking into becoming a teacher. Whether you're still in college or you're looking to make a career change or something like that, hopefully with all of these different voices, you'll be able to find something that applies to your situation. Okay, I rounded up some common questions that I get from you guys. So let's see. The first one is, did you always know that you wanted to be a teacher? And if not, when did you decide to become a teacher? I did not always think that I was going to be a teacher. Both of my parents are teachers actually, and I'm just kind of like naturally a bossy person, so everybody around me thought that I was going to become a teacher, but I was pretty set on doing music. I really wanted to like get out and see the world, so I moved out of my hometown like 12 hours away when I was 18, and I was a music major at first, and then I moved to England to do some missionary work, and then I came back to the United States and like continued to do more music stuff, and then went back into like some history and missionary stuff. But meanwhile, I had started teaching piano and voice lessons as a way to make money during college, and I realized that I really loved it, and I was actually a lot better at teaching piano than I was at playing the piano, and I was better at teaching voice lessons and like building relationships with my students and setting up concerts and showcases and connecting with parents and all that kind of stuff. I realized that I was good at, and at this point I was taking a bunch of history classes, and it was like 7 years into college at this point, maybe 6 years into college, and I decided to switch my focus so that I could become a teacher after I graduated. And everybody who I told was like, yes, duh, thank you for finally like coming around and just falling in line with your calling, because this is what we all knew you were gonna do anyway. The second question is, what was your major in college? And I had quite a few different majors. Started off as a music major, and then I think my only other official major was European history. And I was also getting a minor in kinesiology, so I ended up kind of like combining all of those classes in my 7th year of college so that I could graduate faster. And I put all of that into a liberal studies degree, which at my university was a little bit more like build your own major. So that ended up working out for me. So when I did officially finally graduate, I had a liberal studies degree and a kinesiology minor, and then a bunch of like music and dance classes that counted for nothing. I have taught choir and drama though, so I guess it did kind of like come into play in my career later, but yeah. So then in California, after you graduate with your bachelor's degree, then you enter a credential program. So for the most part, you can't teach with just a bachelor's degree unless you worked at like a private school, or if there was some like really extreme situation where you were like simultaneously teaching and in a credential program. But I went straight into a credential program, and I got a single subject teaching credential in social studies. I had to pass a test that proved that I knew social studies and history in order to get this credential. And I have quite a few other videos about this process, getting my credential, going through BITSA, getting a job, all of that kind of stuff. So I will link as many below that I can think of that are like relevant to you. I'll link all of that stuff because it was definitely a process. So that was what I got my credential in. It was a secondary, meaning like 6th through 12th social studies credential. And then because I had that minor in kinesiology, I also have, I forget what the word is, but it's like a bonus credential in PE. So I can teach social studies, PE, and then as I was applying for jobs, after I graduated with my credential, I realized that a lot of schools were looking for somebody who could teach English and social studies. So then I just took the test. It's called a CSET for English, and I passed that. So then I was able to add an English credential to my existing social studies and PE credentials. So those are the three things that I am qualified to teach. Sometimes people ask me if I ever want to teach elementary, but that's not even an option. I don't even have the qualifications to do that. I can't teach a self-contained classroom, and I can't teach any grades below 6th. And then after that, I also got a master's degree in history. So now technically I could teach history at like the junior college level, or maybe teach like some online history courses or something like that. So I'm glad that I have that to just kind of like expand any opportunities that might come my way. Okay, number 3 is, what kinds of requirements does your state have for teachers? Did you have to do observation hours, student teaching, etc.? So I know California is very different to most states. So like I said, we have to graduate with a bachelor's degree and then take quite a few like prerequisite classes before you can get into a credential program, and you have to pass quite a few tests before you can enter a credential program. There's like the CBEST and the CSETs and all of those. So it takes a little bit of time. So sometimes people ask me questions about like moving to California and becoming a teacher, and there are quite a few hoops that you have to jump through in order to get this process started, and it does take quite a while. So before I started my credential program, I was taking some of those prerequisite classes where I had to do observation hours. So I went to 2 different schools, I think, and I didn't really participate at all. I just like sat in the back and observed a history teacher teaching, and I had to take some notes and, you know, just like do some write-ups about what I observed and what I saw the teachers doing. And actually now, probably weekly, I have pre-service teachers coming into my classroom to do the same thing. I'm always curious what they're writing down. I'm like, is this still what like your professors are telling you to do? What is going into this assignment? What's the professor gonna say? So then after all of that, once I was in my credential program, I did my student teaching, and I went to Cal State Fullerton. So the process for student teaching there is that you student teach for 1 full school year. So I student taught at a high school. So I went on the first day of school and I stayed all the way until the last day of school. I was in a 10th grade world history classroom and an 11th grade US history classroom. I had amazing master teachers. I learned so much from them, and I still use so much of what they did to this day. So for the first like quarter, I just observed. I would have to be there every day and check in every day, and I think like take some notes and stuff, and, you know, do some assignments or whatever based on my observations. And then I slowly started taking over classes little by little. And then in California, in order to get your credential, you do these things called TPAs. So there's like TPA 1, TPA 2, TPA 3, and TPA 4, and they're really, really, really long reports about something that you've like researched in your student teaching, and then like created lesson plans based on that. So like one of the TPAs, I think number 3, is making your teaching accessible to English learners. So you have to get a lot of like statistics about the students in your classes, and you have focus students, and you need to look at their scores, and then you write lessons that you can prove are accessible to these students, and you teach those lessons, and you have to write up the lesson plans, and you have to reflect on those lesson plans and talk about how they went, and then you have to look at like samples of student work along the way. A lot of times it's like student work from the beginning of a unit and then kind of comparing it to work at the end. So it's a lot of documentation. It's a lot of being very purposeful in everything that you're doing. And then like TPA 4, you have to film yourself teaching a lesson and you turn that in. So we have this entity called the CTC, California Commission on Teacher Credentialing or something like that. So you have to turn everything into that entity and then like pay them, you know, to go through all your paperwork too, of course. And then they will decide if you get a teaching credential. So there's a lot to do. And then once you finally finish all of that, you'll just like have kind of like an account online that future employers could look at to confirm that you do in fact have a teaching credential. But it's not a master's, it's like not really grad school, it's just this extra thing. So if you wanted a master's degree on top of that, that would be separate. Some schools do something where they kind of combine the two, but my program that I did didn't combine them because I didn't get a master's in education, so. Okay, number 4, I get this question a lot. How did you decide which age group, elementary or secondary, or subject you wanted to teach? So I knew that I loved history, and as I was taking all of these classes and I was learning so much myself, especially coming from like such a small town and kind of having a pretty narrow like worldview. So I was learning all these things. I was just thinking about how amazing it would be if in middle school or in high school you had a much broader education, and I wanted to be able to bring that to students. So it just never really occurred to me to teach elementary. I've just never even thought about it. I just always knew that I wanted to teach history, and I was also really interested in teaching PE because I just think physical activity and physical movement and sports and competition are so empowering for girls. And I wrote a lot of papers about that. It was very encouraging and empowering for me when I was in middle school. So it was just kind of more about like my passion. Like I wanted to work with older students in these subjects in particular. And then English I just added later because I wanted to get a job. But now that I teach English, I love it, and there's so much that you can do through literature and through informational text. And I'm actually really happy that I ended up adding that. But as far as like very specific, you know, like if I wanted to teach like 11th grade US history again, which I really did love, you usually can't set your sights on anything that specific. Like if you want to teach like 2nd grade or whatever, because depending on like where you're applying to jobs, there are only certain positions that are going to open every year, and you just apply for whatever you are credentialed for or whatever, you know, you have the prerequisites to teach. And then whenever a job opens up in any of those areas, you just go apply and interview and hope that you'll get it. So I was definitely not picky about what I was teaching once I started applying for jobs. Anything in history, PE, or English in any middle school or any high school, I was willing to apply for and willing to teach. And currently, I probably should have put this as like one of the first questions, but currently I teach 6th grade history and 8th grade English at a middle school, and I love it. Number 5 is, did you do any substitute teaching? And I only did a couple days of substitute teaching. So when I got my credential, this was right when budget cuts in California were really, really bad. So they were laying off teachers left and right, and those teachers got the first chance at any sub jobs, and I think they got paid like their daily rate. So this was part of just, you know, taking care of those teachers who had already been teaching in that district. So most districts were not hiring anybody else to be a substitute because they would have been like in competition for jobs with those teachers who were laid off. So I really couldn't get any substituting jobs, but the only subbing that I really did was for my master teachers when I was a student teacher. So anytime that they had to be out of the classroom, I would just be their sub for the day because I already knew exactly what was going on and I knew exactly how to teach their classes, and that ended up being really easy for them. So one of my master teachers actually had a family emergency and she had to be out for like 2 weeks, and so it was actually kind of nice that she didn't really have to worry about any sub plans or anything. She just, you know, told me to take her class while she dealt with her family stuff, and I just like continued with where she had left off. But I didn't really go into very many like, you know, unfamiliar classrooms and teach students that I didn't know, so I didn't get a lot of experience doing that. Number 6, what was the process like to apply for the first teaching job you were hired for? So in California, and I think in a lot of other places now too, you apply for jobs on EdJoin. So edjoin.com or edjoin.org maybe is a website where schools post positions that they have available, and then teachers or prospective teachers can put in their applications online through that website. So I was just applying for like any job pretty much within like a 200-mile radius of where we lived. And this job that I finally did get was a part-time history teacher position at a middle school. This was before like LCAP, so it was paid for with like categorical funds, and they just needed to fill like these 3 periods of their day. It was a temporary position. The teacher who had had it before was like teaching abroad for the year. So it was a really unstable, kind of just like strange position, but 200 people applied for it because we were all desperate. So I went in and did the interview. It was the principal and I think like 2 teachers from the school. And to be honest, I think since it was categorical funds, they were looking for somebody who was brand new because that would be the cheapest person to hire. And, you know, I said I was willing to like coach different things and do like drama or choir or whatever, you know, anything that I could do to help the school or help me get the job. And I have a feeling that's kind of what they liked to hear. So I got the call that they had chosen me for their new teacher. And I remember I was actually on campus at Cal State Fullerton taking a class for my master's because I was continuing to take morning classes for my master's and then work in an after school program in the afternoons. But then they called me and told me I got that job, so I had to like go to the registrar real quick and like drop all my morning classes, switch them all to afternoon classes, because now I would be teaching 3 classes in the morning and then going to school, and then I had to go put in my 2 weeks notice at the after school program where I worked. So for the first week or 2 of school, of like me teaching, I had to do both. I like couldn't just quit my after school management position until they found somebody to replace me. So for like a few weeks there, it was just like really nuts. Number 7, were there any common interview questions you remember? This is another question that I'll get pretty often in my DMs, just about like, okay, what kind of questions should I expect in an interview? I think every interview I went on, they asked me about like my classroom management policy, asked me how I would keep in contact with parents, what my like lesson plan process was like how I would make sure that I reached all students, made all of my lesson plans accessible to every kid in my class. What else did they ask? Classroom organization. Usually they would say like, you know, tell us about one of your favorite lessons, or like if we walked into your class on a typical day, what would we see? So you should have some like specifics like that ready to go, because I did tend to get those types of questions a lot. Number 8, what was the first teaching position you were hired for? Grade level, subject, etc. So this was the 8th grade US history teaching job, and it was 3 periods a day. So I taught 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, and then I was done for the day. But I would always do some planning during 4th period and then eat lunch with all of my coworkers. And then I would stick around till the end of the day and continue working on lesson plans and grading. So even though I was only paid to be there part-time, I was always there full-time. And then I also coached volleyball after school for $0. And I choreographed the school play for $0. So I would stay until like 4:30 or 5 unless I had grad school classes, and then I would go to those at night. So they got a great deal out of me. Number 9, what did you feel prepared for on the very first day of your very first job? What did you feel unprepared for? So I knew my content because I was like currently in grad school. I was constantly reading, constantly going to these amazing lectures. I constantly had access to tons of information. So I knew that I could like provide my students with answers and like interesting lessons, but I did feel kind of unprepared for distilling all of that down into an 8th grade accessible level. I was going to grad school and, you know, sitting through 3-hour lectures and doing readings on my own at home and then like coming to class prepared, and that is just not how an 8th grade history class works. So my first couple days I did a lot of lecture and students were just kind of like sitting like, okay. And I think as a new teacher too, it was a little bit of me trying to like assert myself. It's like, I know what I'm talking about, I know what I'm doing, but 8th graders don't care about that. They need to be engaged. You need to adapt things so that they are talking with each other, so that their thinking is challenged, so that they are maybe moving around the room, so that things are kind of like fresh every day. And I caught on to that really, really quickly. And like I said, I spent just as much time planning my lessons as I spent teaching them. I mean, I guess I spent 3 times as much time planning my lessons, because I'd plan for about 3 hours and then, you know, teach one lesson 3 times. So on one hand, it was kind of a blessing to only work part-time my first year, even though I like desperately needed the money of a full-time job. But I was able to set such a strong foundation of lesson planning that I was able to use like for years to come when I still taught 8th grade US history. And I always felt super prepared the next morning when I came into school, because the day before I would lay out everything that I needed. I would write the objective on the board, I would write standards on the board, I would just have like everything ready to go. So I always felt ready to teach the next morning when I walked into class. And then number 10, do you have any last bit of advice for people who are on their journey to become a teacher? If you're watching these videos, you are already on your way and doing the first thing that I would say, which is just making sure you know exactly what you need to check off in order to become qualified to become a teacher wherever you are. So if it's California, you have a lot of things that you need to do. Maybe in other states there are different things that you need to do. But make a checklist, figure out the timeline, like for the test that you take in California to become subject matter competent, the CSETs, they only offer those a couple of times a year. So you've got to figure out like, okay, if I take it at this time and then I get my results at this time, then I can apply for a program at this time and teach this time. But what if I don't pass them this time? Then I got to figure out. So you just have like all these timeline issues that you have to sort of predict and just be ready for. But the good thing is that that time in the long run, it's short. So, you know, like if there's so many things that you have to do and you're going to be really stressed and you're trying to work at the same time and make money at the same time, but you're like working for free when you're student teaching and you're taking all these tests which you pay for, and if you don't pass it you got to pay for it again. So it can be a really stressful, difficult time, but that will be over eventually, and then you'll get into your teaching job, and then you've got many, many years until you retire. Many, many, many years. But take in as much information as you possibly can. Even today, I think this is my 8th year teaching, if we count that like part-time year. If there's a lecture that I hear about at a local university about something that I teach, I go. There's a movie showing at USC next week about schools in China, and I'm going to that because that applies to my teaching. I read constantly, I listen to great podcasts about teaching and about content, and I make connections with other teachers here on the internet, on YouTube and on Instagram and on Twitter. So build your network, learn from those people, take all of their free ideas that they're sharing, and maybe just create like a little file on your computer or like a little Wakelet collection or something, a Pinterest collection of like good ideas that you find that when you do become a teacher and like you're so stressed because you have your classroom to set up and your students to get to know and your outfit to pick out and your coworkers to get to know and all of that stuff, and you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed. Then go to that file where you saved all of these great ideas that you had been saving up for the past couple of years and pull from some of those things and be grateful to you from the past for saving that stuff up for you. So that is the end of the questions. I hope that this was helpful for you. And again, check out that playlist because there are other people who I've invited to add to this playlist who teach elementary school or who teach in different states or who came into teaching as a second career. And so if you're in a different situation from me, then some of these other videos might also be able to help you toward this journey of becoming a teacher. I started this channel when I was a pretty new teacher. It was just like my 2nd or 3rd year, and all of that like new stuff, taking the CSETs and doing my credential and BITSA and all of that was really fresh in my mind. So if you scroll way back into my old videos, it's a lot of that kind of stuff. A lot of tips for new teachers and like my journey as a new teacher. So feel free to dig around a little bit on this channel and explore, because I have about 400 videos here from the past 6 years or so. So this is all just to help other teachers out whenever you've got time to search these things up, whenever you've got time to watch YouTube videos on your phone while you're doing the dishes or doing laundry or whatever. I get it. That's the same way that I have to consume content when you're really busy, but this is here for you. And thank you to everybody who has contributed to this playlist. And don't forget that it is growing. We will continue to add to it as more people have time to make a video. So thank you so much for stopping by today. Good luck on your teaching journey. Let me know how it's going down in the comments below, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.